Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Welcome. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre blasted Prime Minister Justin Trudeau on social media, saying he needs to designate the Houthis as a terrorist group. The Alberta government announced a pilot project to turn over 1.5 million tires into energy. And Operation Christmas Child has begun once again. We hear what some of the biggest needs are for underprivileged children around the world.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau told the Foreign Inquiry into Foreign Interference that geopolitical threats and foreign interference have increased over the past number of years. He says the Russian invasion of Ukraine, the pandemic, and changing technology have all been factors. Trudeau also said during his testimony that the world is more uncertain and less safe due to the rise of authoritarian powers determined to sow chaos here in Canada. The inquiry is finishing the latest phase of its work and is looking at how agencies can better detect and combat foreign meddling. Federal Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre took to social media to criticize Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and his stance on the terrorist group, the Houthis. On X, Poilievre says, quote, Trudeau buckled under pressure from common-sense Conservative demands to ban the terrorist group Samidoun in Canada, but is still refusing to ban the Houthis from operating on Canadian soil. Hate crimes are up 251%, and violent crime is up 51% after 9 years of the NDP Liberals failing to protect our people. The war between Israel and Hezbollah continues in Lebanon. There are reports now that the Israel Defense Forces have eliminated around 300 Hezbollah terrorists. According to TBN Israel correspondent Yair Pinto, the Israeli military has made large inroads since their ground offensive into southern Lebanon.
The IDF has taken control of a key headquarters of the Radwan force in southern Lebanon, which is located in a tunnel about 800 meters long and 10 meters deep beneath the surface. This is just a short distance from the Israeli border. Also, in the last 24 hours, dozens of fierce battles have resulted in the elimination of over 300 Hezbollah terrorists, greatly weakening their fighting strength in southern Lebanon. However, Hezbollah is also increasing the rate of rocket and drone fire into Israeli civilian communities, sending millions of Israelis into bomb shelters overnight. There is also evidence that some of the surviving mid-level Hezbollah operatives are trying to flee Lebanon, while other Lebanese factions are cutting their ties and increasing their criticism of Hezbollah, trying to let the IDF know that they don't deserve to be targeted. Meanwhile, the IDF continues to hit Hezbollah targets in Beirut, disrupting their operations and their plans for this war.
Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky presented part of his country's victory plan in Ukraine's parliament. Major points of the plan include an invitation for Ukraine to join NATO and permission to use Western-supplied longer-range missiles to strike military targets deep inside of Russia. Now, these are all steps that have received a lot of pushback from Kyiv's allies so far.
Пункт перший. Геополітичні. Пункти другий і третій – вони військові. Пункт четвертий – економічний. Пункт п'ятий – плану перемоги безпековий. Пункти розраховані по часу дуже конкретно. Перші 4 – це час війни, щоб її завершити. П'ятий пункт – на час після війни, щоб гарантувати безпеку. Перший пункт – це запрошення в НАТО зараз.
Closer to home, the UCP will be holding its convention November 1st and 2nd in Red Deer. Just over 5,400 members are registered to attend. They'll be debating 35 party resolutions, including banning transgender people from women's washrooms and the use of non-binary gender identifiers on government documents. According to our legislative reporter, Tyler Dawson, there are also some unusual policy ideas that will not be discussed.
One of them that really caught my eye, for example, was the idea of bringing in strong mayor legislation in Alberta. Now, this has already happened in Ontario, and it basically means that a mayor is a little bit more than just one vote on council. You know, they have some budget-making responsibilities, they have some veto powers. And there was the proposal that the UCP should consider that as government policy. That did not make the cut. There were some suggestions that there should be funding restrictions on sort of late-term abortions. That didn't make the cut either.
Tyler Dawson will also have details on how the Alberta government is threatening to launch another lawsuit against the federal government's Bill C-69 or the No More Pipelines bill. That's coming up later in our program. New programs were announced to help various industries in Alberta to reduce emissions, turn waste into energy, and increase operational efficiency. Alberta Environment Minister Rebecca Schultz said they now have a new initiative which involves recycling old tires.
This pilot will turn more than 1.5 million old tires into over 15,000 tons of chips that will be used to power facilities just like this one that we are in today. It will be led by our partners at ARMA, the Alberta Recycling Management Authority, and tested out right here in Exshaw, along with 2 other pilots coming soon. But that's not all. We're also investing $10 million from the industry-funded Tier Fund to help more facilities reduce emissions and stay competitive. Led by Emissions Reduction Alberta, the new Strategic Energy Management for Industry program will help dramatically reduce energy costs by upgrading to the latest technology.
Now, following the Alberta government's other announcement on a new primary care initiative on Tuesday, Alberta NDP leader Naheed Nenshi was quick to criticize. Nenshi says without money or doctors present, the announcement was like shuffling deck chairs on a sinking ship. The chair of the Friends of Medicare in Lethbridge, Bev Mundell-Atherstone, says that despite the recent announcement of an increase of physicians in the province, about half of the city's population and 1 million people here in Alberta are still without a doctor.
We are the city that is showing the greatest amount of stress. And it was shown in our ER this summer, where we only had 2 ER doctors on site. And finally in the fall, we went to 3 ER doctors. So we are the canary in the coal mine. And the announcement this morning about the primary care, why didn't they just put money into primary care? That's where we need it. Sign the primary care agreement with the doctors, and we'll keep the doctors here. Even if a medical school is built at the university, graduates wouldn't be coming out for ages because it wouldn't even be open and accepting grads till 2026. So then you have to put it forward about 5-6 years from there. So that would be a long time.
Now, Primary Care Alberta is expected to launch on November the 1st. It'll aim to tackle the lack of physicians for Albertans and the resources for connecting with one. BC Conservative leader John Rustad says his party's platform would lead to a number of years of deficits before balancing the budget after 2 terms. The platform comes shortly before the province's election day on October the 19th.
There is some places we're going to need to be doing some reviewing of government spending. For example, there's $4 billion in contingencies. Last year, there's $5 billion in contingencies. There's things like Clean BC, which is going to be devastating for our economy going forward, that we need to be removing. So we're going to look at all of these NDP pet projects and where that spending is going to make sure that we are respecting taxpayers and we're making sure that we get the best value for the money. However, we are expanding spending on healthcare. We're expanding additional spending on things like education and the other services that are needed are critical for people in British Columbia. What we are looking at, certainly going forward, our deficit will be slightly larger than what the NDP are projecting for this year and for next year as we add those critical additional spending, that additional $1.2 billion annually that will be added into that. However, through our approach with the investment that we need to see in our economy, the additional revenues that will come from there will offset by the time we get to the 3rd and 4th year. Our deficit is projected to be lower than what the NDP's deficit is, and then projecting going forward through to a second term to being able to get to balance.
Well, we enjoyed sun mixed with clouds and fairly mild once again here in southwestern Alberta. Jeanette Rocher is now with a quick peek at the forecast. Jeanette, along with the warmer temperatures, we've also experienced a lot of wind yet again here in the Windy City.
Yeah, that wind from the west is what's doing it for sure, with those gusts up to 60 kilometers per hour. They should be sticking around overnight as well as an overnight low of 5 degrees. And then as we get into tomorrow, Thursday, those winds should lighten up to about 30 kilometers per hour. Daytime high of only 11 degrees, though, which is quite a bit lower than what we have been seeing lately. However, it is still within that seasonal range. But as we get closer to the weekend, we're going to start to see those temperatures rise again, back closer to those 20-degree marks again. So I will be back later in the show to take a closer look at that.
Great. Thanks so much, Jeanette. Research indicates that winter precipitation accounts for a large percentage of the moisture needed by our crops here in southern Alberta. While it's true that rain plays a crucial role in helping our agriculture industry thrive, a melting snowpack also offers great benefits. David Bishop, Region 1 Director for Alberta Grains, talks about the importance of having a big snowpack.
Oh, snowpack. Yeah, that's real important to us. That's where our water comes for irrigation. So if it wasn't for snowpack, we wouldn't have irrigation water. So it's real important to have a decent snowpack. Been fortunate that there's been okay snowpacks the last few years. We were restricted the last couple of years. That was due to the drought conditions and the demand for water, more so than lack of a snowpack. It's real important that we have normal or higher than normal snowfall in the mountains. We're looking forward to see what the winter brings with the snowpack, like you were mentioning before. It'd be great to see good snowfall.
According to Stats Canada, last year's snowpack was the smallest or the lowest level since 1972. Preliminary work has begun on a new temple here in Lethbridge for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. It would become the 10th of its kind here in Canada. The 9-acre development site is located by the Cavendish Farm Centre off the corner of Whoop Up Drive and Mauritania Road. The project was announced in April of last year and will become the 4th House of the Lord in Alberta and the 10th here in Canada. The current work will include installing underground utility lines and soil removal with a goal of completion before the winter gets too severe. Mauritania Road will also need repairs where utility connections are being made. Work on the temple's design and a timetable for construction is ongoing, with a groundbreaking ceremony still to be determined. You know, with growth and expansion comes a lot of challenges. That's part of what the Holy Spirit Catholic School Division is experiencing right now. The board announced earlier this week that they have more than 5,500 students enrolled, which is a 4.35% increase compared to last year. Now, does the division have enough space to meet this demand and need? The board chair explains what the biggest challenges are for his group right now.
We're running out of space. We've run out of teachers. We need to hire more teachers, but with the particular current funding enrollment, their funding formula that our provincial government uses right now, we're always playing catch up. It's not possible to hire teachers when children enter our schools, but we're working with the provincial government on that. Now, within the next few years, we're going to open a new Catholic elementary school on the west side. But what we really need is a modernization of St. Francis Junior High School. We've been working very closely with our local MLA, Minister Neudorf, to push that as a priority of government because we simply need the space. We have no more room to put children, but as a publicly funded Catholic institution, we accept all children and we continue to accept all children, but we need more room for them. Even something as simple as desks or tables and chairs for our children to sit at. We're running out of those as well.
Now, school officials also say with an influx of Mexican immigrants in Picture Butte, they're also hiring some Spanish-speaking teachers. Great to see. A special initiative to help those who cannot shovel snow is coming to the town of Colehurst. It's called the Snow Angels. Caitlin Weaver is the Outreach Services Supervisor at Family and Community Support Services in Lethbridge County. She explains what Snow Angels is all about and who the beneficiaries are.
Basically a sign that you put out on anybody who has like mobility issues that prevent them from shoveling their walkway or their driveway, and they do not have someone who is able-bodied in the home, they would be eligible for this program. And then people walking by can shovel snow. The resident who has the sign has the shovel, and then so people can just do it while maybe they're on their way home from school or they're on their way home from work and they just want to do something good for the community. So they would apply by connecting with FCSS, and then within that page you'll see Snow Angels program, and they can download the application online, or they can go to the Town of Colehurst office as well. And then we would give them a sign that we would display on their lawn that's very clearly indicates that they're in need of some support. But sometimes people need that permission to be like, okay, yes, this person is asking for help. I'm willing to give it. Let's do it. It's open for anybody to shovel.
Weaver says they still need volunteers for the Snow Angels program. That could include community groups or even corporate volunteers. You know, many people who live in southern Alberta are unaware of what a rich history the sport of basketball has in our region. Ken Hamilton has spent decades as a basketball referee right here and has even written a series of books, 9 to be exact, chronicling stories from the past. He says nursing and agriculture schools played a key role in the popularity of the sport, including one agricultural school in Raymond.
And the funny thing about it didn't come around till about 1921. It lasted probably 13 years, but their men's team played until the 1950s. So even though the college was closed and their team was called the Idlers were still competitive as a basketball team into the early 1950s, well after the college even closed. So there was some community support, again, showing you a small town like Raymond. Not only did they have the Idlers, but they had the Union Jacks and the Comets, the high school team.
Make sure you catch the full interview with Ken Hamilton and BCN's Naveen Day chatting about basketball coming up later in our program. Operation Christmas Child is about to begin once again. The initiative, led by Samaritan's Purse, helps to provide toys and school supplies for children in need all over the world. We've all seen those wonderful shoe boxes which are packed. Frank King is the News Media Relations Manager of Samaritan's Purse Canada. He joins us now from Calgary to talk about the initiative. Frank, shoebox drop-off locations have been announced here in southern Alberta. Where should we drop off the shoe boxes once they're filled?
The one is in Park Meadows Baptist Church on 15th Avenue North in Lethbridge. Another one is Faith Community Baptist Church on 3rd Street West in Claresholm. I think that's still in your viewing area. And the third one is Tabor Evangelical Free Church on 48th Avenue in Tabor.
So what are some of the more important items children need this time around, Frank?
Definitely the thing that my wife and I try to get in all our shoe boxes is school supplies. I'm thinking, pencils, paper, erasers, that sort of thing. Because in some countries where the education system is free, the children still need to supply all their own writing materials and pencils and papers and all that. That alone means some children will not get to go to school, will not get to get an education, and will not have an important cog in what it takes to break out of the cycle of poverty that traps so many families in the developing world. So when my wife and I pack our shoe boxes, we always make sure we have school supplies in there. That's a big key one for us.
You returned from Costa Rica recently, where a number of children opened up their Operation Christmas Child shoe boxes. That must have been quite the sight. A great experience. I bet their eyes really lit up.
You know, Hal, it's just amazing the different reactions you get because some kids are so excited. They open up, they're showing it to kids beside them. They're trading stuff, which is fine by us. Other kids, they will look carefully through their box, then they will close it up, and they won't open it up again until they get home so they can show their siblings and their parents. So it's really neat to see the wide variety of expressions and reactions as the kids open this stuff up and see some of these things that generous Canadians have packed for them.
That's awesome. So Frank, if folks want to learn more about Operation Christmas Child and the Shoebox campaign, where should they go?
The easiest place to go is SamaritansPurse.ca. We've already got sort of our homepage on the website sort of littered with Operation Christmas Child stuff. I should mention too that if some of your viewers are living in areas where there are no drop-off locations, the easiest thing to do is go to packabox.ca and you can pack your shoe boxes online. In the last few years, my wife and I have done it this way. It's so handy, it's so convenient. And what happens then is in the new year, we get a whole bunch of volunteers at our Calgary Processing Center. And what we do is we physically pack the shoe boxes that people have done online, and then off they go to countries in Central America and Philippines and Ukraine and French-speaking West Africa.
That's wonderful. Thanks for your time today, Frank. That was Frank King, News Media Relations Manager from Samaritan's Purse, joining us from Calgary. Well, it was another gorgeous day for going on a bike ride around Henderson Lake here in Lethbridge. So many of the fall colors brightening things up. It's beautiful. But things will be cooling off just a little bit. Full weather details are coming up. We've been enjoying a beautiful autumn so far here in southwestern Alberta. Jeanette Rocher is in now with all of the weather details. Jeanette, it's also a good time to maybe do some pumpkin hunting at a number of the pumpkin patches here in southern Alberta.
Oh yeah, it's definitely pumpkin season right now, whether it's for pumpkin pie or for carving or pumpkin seeds. I don't know if you've ever done that, but I love this time of year, especially with this weather that we have been having. So today we saw that beautiful high of 19 degrees. We are going to dip a little bit over the next couple of days down to 11 on Thursday, 13 rather on Friday, which is still within seasonal, and then up to 18 Saturday. We're going to see that 21 degrees again on Sunday, and then we're going to take that dip down to the single digits as we get into next work week. So 7 degrees on Monday and up to 8 on a Tuesday. We're going to feel that for sure. Now the average high for this time of year, 13, average low 0. So even as we get into those single digits, we're still not quite 0 yet. We're still within that seasonal range. 26 was our record high on this day. That happened back in 1963, and way back in 1930 we saw the record low on this day, which was minus 12. 7:56 is when the sun rose this morning. Sunset tonight at 6:37 p.m. So we're seeing 4 minutes less daylight than yesterday. So sitting at 10 hours, 41 minutes of daylight today. Okay, so 14 tomorrow on the island there. Victoria looking at partly cloudy skies and then more sunny by the afternoon. Also some 50K winds in the Juan de Fuca Strait. 12 degrees in Vancouver. Could see a 70% chance of early morning showers and then clearing. 8 degrees in Edmonton tomorrow with clear skies. Beautiful sunny skies tomorrow in Calgary as well with a high of 10 degrees. So there we're hitting our single digits there, and only 10 degrees in Calgary and Edmonton tomorrow. As we look to the rest of the prairies, we're seeing mainly clear skies all around, a high of 11 degrees in Saskatoon, 12 in Regina, and 19 degrees tomorrow in Winnipeg. Should be a lovely one. As we get into the central part of the country here, clear skies in Toronto, high of 16 degrees. Ottawa sitting at 14 tomorrow. Could see some wind chill in the morning too, down to -4, but then climbing throughout the day. 13 for the high tomorrow in Montreal with clear skies as well. As we get to the Maritimes, we're also seeing mainly sunny skies in both of these cities here. Fredericton, 11 degrees, high of 12 in Halifax. Same thing for Charlottetown, and only 9 degrees in St. John's with a 40% chance of showers and then mix of sun and cloud by the afternoon there. So there you have it. That is your forecast.
Food insecurity increased in 2022 as inflation hit peak levels. Stats Canada says 15.6% of households experienced some level of food insecurity 2 years ago after being relatively stable from 2017 to 2021. The reading is based on data from the Canadian Community Health Survey. It's up from 9.6% in 2017 and 11.6% in 2018. In addition to an increase in overall food insecurity, the agency says there was also an increase in severity as more households reported moderate or severe food insecurity. Manufacturing sales in Canada fell to their lowest level since January of 2022. The numbers were pulled down by primary metal and petroleum, along with coal product subsectors. Stats Canada says manufacturing sales declined 1.3% to $69.4 billion in August. That was after rising 1.1% back in July. Sales in the primary metal subsector lost 6.4% to $5.3 billion in August. It was mainly due to lower prices and volumes, while the petroleum and coal product subsector fell 3.7% to $7.8 billion. Sales of aerospace products and parts, meanwhile, rose 7.3% to $2.7 billion. Wood product sales increased 3.8% to $3.1 billion. Canada's Labour Minister is proposing a special mediator in ongoing contract talks at the Port of Montreal. Steve McKinnon's proposal also includes a 3-month freeze on strikes and lockouts. Now, in a social media post, McKinnon said the union and management have until Friday night to either accept or reject his offer. The Maritime Employers Association said it would examine the proposal, but the union declined to comment. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was up 122 points on the day to finish at 24,561. The Dow was up 337 points to 43,077. The S&P 500 was up 27 on the day to 5842, and the NASDAQ was up 51 points to 18,367. West Texas Intermediate Oil was up 10 cents to $70.68 U.S. per barrel. Natural gas was down 12 cents to $2.37 U.S. Gold was down $12.60 on the day to $26.74 U.S. an ounce, and silver was up 20 cents to $31.73 U.S. an ounce. Feed wheat is at $7.95 per bushel, barley's at $6.03, canola's at $13.63, and corn is at $7.21 per bushel. Live cattle were up 33 cents to $187.05. Feeder cattle were down 43 cents to $246.10. And lean hogs December contract was up 50 cents to $78.25. The Canadian dollar was down slightly over the past 24 hours to 72.70 US. Recapping one of our top stories, the UCP will be holding its convention November 1st and 2nd in Red Deer. Just over 5,400 members are registered to attend. They'll be debating 35 party resolutions, including banning transgender people from women's washrooms and the use of non-binary gender identifiers on government documents. Well, our legislative reporter Tyler Dawson will have more on the upcoming UCP convention momentarily. He'll also discuss how the province may be launching another court challenge against Bill C-69, otherwise known as the No More Pipelines Bill. Listen, when you see news happening in your community, be sure to drop us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. Also, be sure to visit our website anytime to check out a number of stories and interviews. UCP members will soon debate 35 party resolutions at their upcoming convention November 1st and 2nd. Now, some of the policy ideas include banning transgender people from women's washrooms and the use of non-binary gender identifiers on government documents. Some of the more unusual policy ideas, however, did not make the cut for what will be debated. To chat about this in more detail is our legislative reporter and the Alberta correspondent for the National Post, Tyler Dawson, who joins us once again from Edmonton. Tyler, what are some of the more unusual policy ideas that won't be discussed?
Well, so the way the whole system works is various constituency associations make policy proposals, and then a document went out to the party membership back in early September, and members could sort of rank or vote on what they felt were the most important policy proposals, and those are the ones that we now see in this 35 strong list. So some of those original ones are, were just sort of unusual. One of them that really caught my eye, for example, was the idea of bringing in strong mayor legislation in Alberta. Now, this has already happened in Ontario, and it basically means that a mayor is a little bit more than just one vote on council. They have some budget making responsibilities, they have some veto powers. And there was the proposal that the UCP should consider that as government policy. That did not make the cut. There were some suggestions that there should be funding restrictions on sort of late-term abortions. That didn't make the cut either. So really what you have here is this sort of final list, and a good chunk of it is very much bread and butter conservative politics, opposition to the carbon tax. I think nobody's surprised that the UCP is going to be debating their opposition to the carbon tax, although I can't imagine there's going to be people on the yes and the no side of that one. And then there's also a whole bunch of sort of social and cultural issues, restrictions around, as you mentioned, where transgender people can use change rooms or washrooms, for example. The other one you mentioned was to only have 2 genders on official government documents. This would actually reverse a policy change made by Rachel Notley's NDP in 2018. So really what you have here is some bread and butter conservative issues and a bunch of sort of social cultural issues that are certainly very exciting for the UCP base. In the broader context, though, I think there's a lot of concern in Alberta right now about cost of living, the state of healthcare. So you have to wonder if the policy proposals that are going to be debated, if these are really the things that Albertans are, particularly concerned about at the moment. So that's something that I think is going to be quite interesting going forward.
Now, during this convention, Daniel Smith will also be facing a leadership review. Now, normally a leader doesn't face a review after winning an election, but this is kind of an unusual quirk the party's put in place.
Yeah, so all this stuff's sort of governed by party bylaws, and one of those rules is that every third convention, or once every 3 years, there needs to be a leadership review, sort of regardless of anything else that's been going on. And Smith didn't have one for the last couple of years. Obviously, the first year she'd just become party leader. Last year she'd just won an election. So this year is sort of by the rules that the party has. This has got to be the year that they do it. But it is unusual. You don't generally win a minority government and then have your party members going, well, I don't really know about this Danielle Smith character. She only led us to a majority government. It's very strange, and it really some of the criticism of it from within the party is that this is really an unstable way to do things. The leader needs to worry about this leadership review when there's other things that maybe should be occupying her time. There's the argument that this is sort of forcing a focus on some of these less mainstream ideas because there's people in the party who are particularly animated and concerned about these things. So the basic idea is that, well, does this really derail the party's sort of overall objectives? And there's been some talk about saying, well, maybe we should stop this. Now, that would require, changes to the bylaws and all that, but it is an unusual situation. And I don't think anyone expects Danielle Smith to lose during that vote, but certainly puts her in a bit of an odd spot coming into this convention.
Tyler, the Alberta government a while ago launched the Tell the Feds campaign, warning that no one wants to freeze in the dark because of the Trudeau government's clean electricity regulations. Well, there's another one that's come forward. They're doing a lot of advertising on this one, attacking the feds once again, but this one is called Scrap the Cap. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, so this is an advertising campaign that's going to be running in, I think, 5 provinces, but a $7 million campaign. And it's going to be in opposition to the forthcoming cap, the emissions cap on the oil and gas sector. So these ads will run in print, social media, online, all that fun stuff across the country. Now, it's going to be interesting how much attention this gets, I think, because one of the things that worked well about the Tell the Feds campaign, about the clean electricity regulations, is that everyone kind of understands what's going to happen if there's not enough power to heat your house or keep the lights on during the middle of winter. You have to wonder if folks in Quebec or Ontario or New Brunswick are going to be quite so concerned about an emissions cap that might force the oil and gas sector to scale back its operations a little bit. But this campaign is at any rate going to talk about, the risk to the economy, the potential for job losses that the emissions cap might bring in. Obviously, there's all sorts of policy areas in which the Alberta government disagrees with the federal government, and this advertising campaign is just another way to keep the pressure on to make sure that that opposition is sort of registered in the public.
Tyler, Alberta's former Justice Minister, Casey Medoux, is being sanctioned by the Law Society of Alberta for phoning the Edmonton police chief after being pulled over by an Edmonton police officer. You and I talked about that in the past.
We have, yeah, a few times, I think. This was way back when, kind of now. And he was Justice Minister under Jason Kenney at the time, and Kenney had pulled him out of the Justice portfolio because of this. There was, I believe, an Ethics Commissioner investigation that sort of found that Medoux had impugned the administration of justice, basically, by as Justice Minister making this phone call to the Edmonton police chief. Medoux defended himself, said he was concerned about racial profiling and things like that. But since he lost his seat in the last election, Medoux has gone back to sort of private practice as a lawyer. And obviously the Law Society has some sort of general sort of governance over the conduct of lawyers and things like that, and can introduce sanctions and things like that. So there's going to be sanctions against him. We don't know what they're going to be yet, but it just goes to show that, this saga is not quite over for the former Minister of Justice, even if he's not actually in politics anymore.
Now, beginning next month, our province will be launching a new health agency called Primary Care Alberta. Officials say it'll be focused on getting more doctors into the province, which we need, and promoting more connectivity between various primary care professions. And unsurprisingly, Tyler, the NDP slammed the idea.
Yeah, Ned Nenshi basically saying this is, shuffling the deck chairs on a sinking ship. Obviously, healthcare is one of those things that the NDP really likes talking about it because it's a good issue for them. And I think it's also very much a large concern for Albertans right now. And so this is part of that much larger overhaul of Alberta healthcare that the UCP has proposed, to sort of have 4 pillars looking at, or managing, I should say, different aspects of the healthcare system. The first one already launched, that's Recovery Alberta, which is sort of the mental health and addiction side of the operation. And as the name suggests, Primary Care Alberta, this is much more on the primary care front. So I think there's some big questions that remain here, whether or not creating these 4 pillars is going to improve efficiency and communication across these pillars, or whether or not, having them hyper focused on a specific thing, which is what the government is saying, is going to improve healthcare outcomes. Maybe a bit early to tell. Although there were some numbers out just the other day that I think Alberta got about 500 new doctors in the last quarter or so. But this is top of mind, I think, for a lot of Albertans, and the UCP is trying to do something on it. It's hard to say, I think, whether or not it's going to work. I mean, there's been so many reorganizations of healthcare over the years. If we think back to the super boards and all that stuff from, oh gosh, that must have been the Prentice years, maybe the Stelmach years, long time ago anyway. So I think time will tell primarily whether or not this is improving the healthcare outcomes in the province.
Tyler, Premier Daniel Smith will be looking for a new Chief of Staff. Marshall Smith will be stepping down. Smith is notable for being the driving force behind the UCP's addiction strategy. Do we know why he's leaving?
Well, he's been in politics for a really long time, and is just sort of heading towards retirement, seems to be the outcome. There doesn't seem to have been any, particular scandal or anything to push him out the door. But it is going to be interesting because Marshall Smith, who I should say is not related to Danielle Smith, has, as you say, been really the driving force behind one of these big policy areas, and that's the addictions and recovery sort of aspect of the drug crisis. And Marshall has been pushing the idea that there should be recovery, that it should be a recovery-oriented system, and he's been working really hard on that really since 2019 when the UCP first formed government. So it's going to be interesting to see how that that philosophy, I guess, is sustained, or if he feels maybe that there are people in place now who will carry on that mission, I guess. But obviously for the Premier, she needs to find a new Chief of Staff, and doubtless that means there's going to be some changes in the Premier's office, and journalists are going to have to get to know a new person to contact and chat with here and there off the record and things. So it'll be interesting to see what changes, if anything. But it isn't, I mean, staffing change in the Premier's office is not really all that regularly, a news story. But in this case, Marshall, I think, is such a distinctive presence in the government that this really caught people's attention.
The Alberta government is threatening to launch another lawsuit against Bill C-69, otherwise known as the No More Pipelines Bill. Tyler, didn't our province already win a legal challenge at the Supreme Court against that legislation?
Yes, indeed. Back in 2023, the Supreme Court sided with Alberta on parts of Bill C-69, not the whole thing. The whole thing was not found unconstitutional, but big chunks of it were. And so usually what happens when legislation is found unconstitutional, it goes back to the Parliament or the legislature, and they sort of craft new legislation to sort of fit into the fit around the constitutional guidelines, I guess, that the courts have given. So that's what's happened here. And Alberta is obviously not happy with the changes that the Liberals in Ottawa have made to that legislation. So there is a threat of another lawsuit. I think Danielle Smith gave them November 1st or 2nd sort of as a deadline to do that before a lawsuit is launched. Obviously, that's not going to happen. Obviously, the Liberals are not going to completely rewrite this legislation just because Premier Smith is upset about it. So there could be another, perhaps almost certainly will be another legal challenge here. And then, of course, time will tell whether or not this challenge is as successful as the one before, which, Alberta has a mixed record on this, right? We lost on the carbon tax, won on Bill C-69. So if the province takes another crack at it, who knows what that outcome could be.
Maybe Trudeau needs to consider another environment minister instead of Stephen Guilbeault there. That relationship is not the strongest between he and Premier Daniel Smith.
No, it's not. It's been a fairly fractious one, but Smith has said that she works relatively well with Jonathan Wilkinson, who I think is the Energy and Natural Resources Minister. So there are some okay relationships between the Alberta government and the federal government, but when it comes to Guilbeault and Alberta politicians, not a lot of warm feelings between the two.
They're not sending each other Christmas cards, is what you're saying?
No, I can't imagine they are.
No. Tyler, no by-election date yet for Lethbridge West here in our riding. It needs to come by the end of the year. Do you anticipate that it will be announced when the legislature resumes in a couple of weeks' time?
Well, that's my guess. I mean, you really don't want to leave this till like December. No one wants to be voting in a by-election or campaigning in a by-election in the middle of winter. So you have to think it's coming soon. Have it soon, relatively short sort of campaigning period, and then go to the polls. I would be shocked if it didn't come sort of by the end of the month or early next month. But who knows? Maybe there's some 4D chess happening here and delaying this. But I do think it obviously has to happen by January 1st, and I think it would be unusual to have it sort of towards Christmas when the legislature ends up on break and stuff like that. So I think it will happen sooner rather than later, and then that'll obviously be the first big test for Nenshi as leader of the NDP. It'll obviously be a bit of a test for the sort of stability and allure, I guess, of Danielle Smith's UCP and a riding that has been an NDP riding for almost a decade. So there's I think it's high stakes in many ways, and it'll be really interesting to watch. But the question is, when are we going to get to watch it?
And the two candidates, too, both very strong. You've got the NDP's Rob Miyashiro, former city councillor and current city councillor for the UCP, John Middleton Hope, who's also the former police chief here in Lethbridge. So they both have very, very deep roots. So yeah, it'll definitely be interesting with this by-election. He's our legislative reporter and the Alberta correspondent with the National Post, Tyler Dawson. Thanks so much for joining us once again from Edmonton.
Thanks for having me, Hal.
Southern Alberta is known for its love of basketball, but I'll bet most of us aren't fully aware of how far back this goes historically. Today's guest certainly does, though. We are joined by Ken Hamilton. He is from Lethbridge and spent decades as a basketball referee here. He is also the author of Southern Alberta Basketball, A History in Pictures. Ken, welcome to Bridge City News. It's great to have you with us.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Now, Ken, we're not just talking about one book. This is a series of books, 9 in total. Can you give us a brief overview of what the books focus on? Because I understand a number of different Southern Alberta towns are touched on here.
Yeah, and to step back one more, this is series 1. We plan to have a series 2, which will be 6 or 7 more books.
Wow.
It kind of tend to evolve as I get writing them. Series 1, I had no intention of writing something like this. We were at a college men's game in February of 2023, and my first published book had been released in December of 2022. And the college men's coach's wife said, "Oh, I heard you wrote a book." And I said, "Yeah." And she thought it was about refereeing or about basketball. And I said, "No." "Well, you should write one about officiating. You refereed for 26 years at the highest levels, and you probably have lots of stories." And I said, "Yeah, but nobody would read them." And I thought that'd be it. Walking my dog, next couple of days, I realized Southern Alberta is rich in a long history of Alberta of basketball. And I thought, I'm retired now. I've still got some connections. I could probably do something. So I started with the idea of just doing all the history in 3 books. But the more I researched, the more it was going to take more. And so that's how we've ended up with series 1 for 9 books, and then series 2 to cover the rest. But the first series, we do Raymond, Cardston, and McGrath, and we look at all the high school basketball, senior men's, senior women's, town ball, church ball, and the communities who had high school programs that collapsed and were co-opted or joined the McGrath, Raymond, or Cardston schools. And then decided to finish the 4A schools here. We've got LCI, Lethbridge Collegiate. Chinook High School is only 14 years old, so it's only got a short history, but I didn't want to leave it out. So, and Chinook kind of evolved from LCI. So it's in the back of the LCI book. And then we have Winston Churchill and Catholic Central, the Lethbridge College, the University of Lethbridge. And then probably my most interesting one, I think, is, it's a 2-part book. It's called The Forgotten Programs and Officiating. And I call it Forgotten Programs because while I was doing my research, I found about 38 either high school or post-secondary basketball programs in Southern Alberta that no longer exist. So I had to bring them up.
Now, this is all really fascinating. The fact that you've already written 9 books for Series 1, and then there's several more coming for Series 2. You also mentioned Raymond. So can you tell us about the Raymond Union Jacks from the 1920s? Because I understand that they were one of the most dominant teams in the country.
At that time, they played in the very first Senior Men's National Championship. Now, you have to remember, too, or realize that senior men's basketball across Canada was the top level of ball. It was a combination of university ball and what we would call professional ball, because there was no cross-Canada university competition, simply because the majority of universities in Canada were in Ontario, Quebec, and the Maritimes. In the Western provinces, we had 1 per province. So senior men's ball was the big deal. They had their very first national championship in 1923-24. And that was interestingly enough, the year that the Union Jacks won the national championship. But there was an asterisk there. because they won it by default. At that time, the challenging teams were expected to pick up the expenses of the visiting team for the championships, and the Ontario and Quebec teams refused to pay for cover Alberta's costs to go there. So the National Association, the national head of basketball, simply said, okay, you guys forfeit, we're awarding the national championship to Raymond. And so they were the first national championship team, and they're from Southern Alberta, small town Southern Alberta. So they kind of are a very famous team around here. And to this day, the town of Raymond, every once in a while, a new iteration of the Union Jacks will pop up. And the high school team now has a replica jersey of the Raymond Union Jacks as one of their high school jerseys. So basketball is big here.
Absolutely, yeah. Now, something viewers might find interesting is that back in the day, the main venue for Lethbridge basketball tournaments was at the Civic Center, which is now the Lethbridge Senior Citizens Organization. Tell us a little bit about that.
It was called the Lethbridge Sports Center initially, and it was the hub of the community. It hosted all kinds of events, political, agricultural, community events. There were two gyms, a big one and a small one, but it was also where most of the big-time basketball was played. The senior men's games were played there, and usually the senior men's games had a warm-up game that involved high school teams, but the university used the Sports Civic Center as its home gym for the first couple of years until they got their first gymnasium built. And it's hosted what was called the Christmas tournament for probably 40 years. That was a senior men's / college / university type tournament every Christmas, and probably one of the most famous in Western Canada.
Really? Wow.
It came from all over.
Now, let's include a bit of history about women's basketball, because I understand that some of our nursing schools used to have some really good women's teams.
Well, let me touch 2 points on the senior women's basketball. There were two levels of senior basketball. Level A was the top level. That was the Union Jacks, Lethbridge Broders, Raymond or McGrath Rockets. That was A level. That was teams that had deep pockets, big sponsors, and they played for a national championship. The senior B level was teams that didn't have big pockets or big sponsors, and they played for a provincial championship. So there were two nursing schools in Lethbridge. At that time, the big hospitals throughout the province, there was no nursing program at a college. The hospitals taught the nursing programs. So here, the Galt Hospital nursing program and the St. Michael's Hospital nursing program each had ladies basketball teams that played in the senior ladies basketball league. And then they would travel to Medicine Hat and Calgary and play teams from those hospitals. But more importantly, at the senior A ladies level, we had a team from Cardston called the Cardston Shooting Stars, and they played for the national championship in 1947-48 against the Toronto Montgomery Maids. So here's a little team, ladies team from little Cardston, Alberta, traveled to Toronto to play, and most of them had probably never been anywhere bigger than Calgary. And so they traveled to Toronto to play the national championship game for senior ladies. The only time a Southern Alberta team has made it, women's team has made it that far. And they came in. So they're both at the senior ladies A and B levels. We've got some really strong history in Southern Alberta.
Now, while we were preparing for this interview, one of our producers read somewhere that the very first basketball game in Western Canada was played in Sterling, Alberta, back in 1903. Is that true?
No, it was played in Raymond, but it was won by Sterling.
Oh.
In 1904, the Raymond Agriculture Stampede hosted the first formal basketball game in Alberta. And actually, it was the Northwest Territories, and it didn't become Alberta till 1905. And it was played on the infield of the rodeo grounds, on the dirt. It was between McGrath and Sterling won the first tournament. Now, you remember, too, that basketball at that time, there were no buildings big enough in Alberta to play inside. So for the first number of years, until we could construct buildings big enough, it was a summer game played outside on the dirt. In my research, I found one picture of a ladies' team playing on the dirt in southern Alberta, and it was the Claresholm College of Agriculture ladies' team in probably 1925.
Okay, good. I'm glad you're mentioning that, because you also mentioned Southern Alberta's forgotten schools, and I was going to say an example that Claresholm used to have an agricultural school that also had a basketball team. So can you talk more about Claresholm and these other forgotten schools?
Yeah, in 1911, the province of Alberta decided that they were going to build 6 agricultural colleges spread throughout the province, so that to give the farmer type kids, the farmer communities, an opportunity to learn to be better farmers. All the courses were aimed at the farm or the ranch. So the first 3 were built in Vermilion, Olds, and Claresholm. And the Vermilion School is now called Lakeland. And the only one out of those 3 that still exists is the Olds College. Claresholm College of Agriculture was around for probably 10, 11 years. Then it was converted to a hospital. There was a flu epidemic that they converted the college to a hospital, and then it was closed after that. None of those schools, other than Olds and Lakeland, out of those initial 6, still exist. But Raymond also had an agricultural college. And the funny thing about it didn't come around till about 1921. It lasted probably 13 years, but their men's team played until the 1950s. So even though the college was closed and their team was called the Idlers were still competitive as a basketball team into the early 1950s, well after the college even closed. So there was some community support, again, showing you a small town like Raymond. Not only did they have the Idlers, but they had the Union Jacks and the Comets, the high school team. So Raymond is king for basketball.
And staying on the topic of post-secondaries, there is a rich history of rivalry between the Lethbridge Polytechnic and University of Lethbridge basketball teams. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Well, that goes probably right back to the start, because the college, the Lethbridge Junior College, as it was called, was said to be the first publicly funded community college in the country. And it started its basketball program in the late 1950s. So they had basketball right from the 1950s. Now, later, the University of Lethbridge was granted its charter in 1967. But the first few years that the university was around, they held classes at the college because they had to build their facility. And then when the university was built, the classes moved across the river to the university campus, and they played their games downtown in the civic center. But they had a rivalry that was amazing. We had a game between the college and the university earlier this week at the college, and it attracted quite a few fans. But back in the 70s, we have our big building here is called the NMAX Center, recently changed to the visit Lethbridge.ca arena. It's where our WHL team plays. So it seats about 5,000 people. And throughout the 70s, that was the host gym for the crosstown rivalry between the Kodiaks and the Pronghorns. And they would, I don't know if they'd pack the place, but they would definitely get huge. It was, and especially when the college would win, that would, the college beat the university, and that would just stoke that rivalry more and more and more. And then it slowly died away, and now it's on life support, but they're bringing it back.
And just to wrap things up, because we are coming to the close of our interview, there are a couple of events that viewers might want to mark on their calendar. This Thursday, October 17th at 7 p.m. at the visitlethbridge.com arena, there will be a celebration to honor Southern Albertans who played on Canada's Olympic team over the years, and they'll be able to meet you, Ken, and your books will be available. I also believe that there will also be a preview of the upcoming Western Slam NCAA Division I men's basketball games at the arena November 28th to 30th. What are the names of some of the former Olympians being honored?
I divided it up into two eras. The modern era that I call the modern era starts about 1970. That was about the time that Canada basketball decided that there were enough college athletes that they could have tryouts to form the Olympic team or the national team. So we've got, at one point, there was 3 guys from Raymond on the national team. And again, Raymond is 2,500 people. So you got 3 out of 12 of the players from Raymond. It's an amazing statistic. It was Al Williams, Phil Tallstrip, and Tim Tallstrip. And the 2 Tallstrips also, they played at Brigham Young and Idaho State or Utah State, for their 4-year NCAA eligibility, and then both moved back home and played for the University of Lethbridge for the 5th year of eligibility. And Phil Tallstrip was the captain of the national and Olympic team. In the Montreal Olympics, he led the team to a 4th place finish and finished 4th in points. Shauna Molchak, also a University of Lethbridge Pronghorn, was on the ladies' team at the Atlanta Olympics. Perry Merkovich was on the 1980 Olympic team that was supposed to go to Moscow, but Canada boycotted those Olympics. We have more recently Casey Bosch and Paige Crozon. Casey's a Lethbridge girl and played at the Gonzaga and the U of L. Both her and Paige were assistant coaches on the ladies basketball team at the university. They were on the Canada's 3x3 women's team at the Paris Olympics. They came in 4th. So for Lethbridge being a small community, or Southern Alberta being a small community, we also have Ross Beckering, who, even though he played for the Netherlands in the Tokyo Olympics in the men's 3-on-3 team for the Netherlands. So we're going to count Ross too, because an Olympian's a big deal, and we're fortunate to have that number that have played ball from Southern Alberta in the Olympics.
Wow, that's just really fascinating to hear. Ken Hamilton is the author of Southern Alberta Basketball, A History in Pictures, available on Amazon. Ken, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you.
I'm Naveen Day. On behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News, thanks for watching.